Just gonna say, I only watched the film yesterday, but I just really enjoyed it. I'm to be honest with you, I'm one of those people where if Maxine Peake's in a movie, I'm just kind of sold right from the offset. I'm not. I'm going to get started because I haven't got sort of too long today. But I'm just going to begin by asking sort of where the idea for Fanny Lye Deliver'd sort of originated from. Was it a story that's sort of been with you for some time?
Well, I think when I was younger, I read a book, "The World Turned Upside Down" by Christopher Hill, about the history of radical groups in the 17th century, and it's a book that changes everything you knew about English history. It turns it on its head, and ever since reading that book, I always wanted to make a film about that period, but I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And another thing I've always wanted to make is a western, because I love westerns. So I guess the eureka moment was I had this idea that maybe I could make a western set in the 17th century dealing with that topic, and I guess once I had that idea, it all kind of flowed from there.
Yeah, because I mean, it's quite a unique stomping ground in really. It's sort of part of English history. I've got to say, I don't know an awful lot about. I mean, in some ways, did that give you a bit of a freedom? Because I guess you weren't sort of tied down to the kind of the social political context of more kind of well-renowned parts of British history.
I mean, there've been a few films, not very many. It's certainly true, I think, and that was again part of the reason for wanting to make the film. But I mean, there's Winstanley, I guess, by Kevin Brownlow is the main one, covering the diggers, and there was a series on Channel 4. There was they made a biopic in the '60s about Cromwell, starring Richard Harris. There's the odd film here and there, but certainly it's an underexplored period of history, and that gives you more freedom to make a film.
Yeah, because I feel like my whole sort of like understanding of history is all done by the kind of significant time periods, be it kind of big battles or monarchs and stuff like that. But you forget about the kind of vast array of stories and characters and people that made up the in between. So it must have been quite. Is this part of history, this kind of specific part? Is it just a time that's always been quite interesting to you? And how do you feel about understanding different people in those periods and kind of getting into the heads of the kind of people that lived through these times?
Well, I mean, one of the great things about the Civil War period is that two things combined. You had the portable printing press had just been invented, and the government started to lose control of the country, and the Puritans were actually inciting people to publish and to write their thoughts to undermine the king. And so you suddenly had this explosion of pamphlets expressing people's thoughts and ideas and philosophies, just coming from ordinary common people. And it's a voice that is essentially absent prior to that date. So that there's you have there's a wealth of material there that you can read and use for research.
And how was it being on set and kind of seeing these characters and this world that came from your mind suddenly fully formed and realised in front of you? Could that be overwhelming for a filmmaker to see the words they once wrote and suddenly you've got hundreds of people running around to make your kind of ideas come to life? Or do you not have the time to kind of stop and appreciate it in the moment? Is that something that comes afterwards?
Not hundreds, but yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think you're right. I think by the time you get to the shoot, then yeah, every minute counts, and you're just very focused on trying to get it in the can. I think it's afterwards when you're editing and you finally start putting it together that's I guess the moment that you finally see the film, and that's I guess the most satisfying moment. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, this film's obviously been on quite a journey. I mean, it must be quite a strange feeling to know that it's kind of here now. It's kind of being released at last. I mean, how does it feel to kind of have got to have been on this? Because it's been sort of a number of years this film's kind of been in the works. Just to finally be sat here thinking, God, it's being actually released to the public in a week's time.
It has taken a while, yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I'm really looking forward to people or a wider audience finally seeing the film. And we had a few festival screenings before the pandemic came along, but it's nice that we finally get a wider audience.
Yeah, because I was reading it spent 3 years in post. What was the kind of journey for this movie that's taken it from when you first begun it to now? What's been behind the kind of the time it's taken?
Yeah, I wrote the script in about 2012. And we had a fairly winding route, I guess, to getting getting funding together and getting the film started. I think what was probably more unusual was the post-production, as you say, that primarily because I did a lot of it myself, partly because we ran out of money during the shoot, and one way to solve that was for me to kind of take on more things. It's like, I'll do this, and partly I think the music became a big issue, that just couldn't quite find the right composer, and in the end decided to do that myself as well. So over a year was spent on the music in the end, and that was essentially the cause of the delay.
Yeah, but I thought the score was fantastic. So I was just wondering about when so that all came to you. That was all an idea you'd had after sort of shooting the film. Because I was wondering if when you were directing certain scenes, if you started to picture the music in your head while you were directing, if you had any ideas that happened that early on.
Not quite that early on. I mean, I had a sense of which moments would be kind of music moments, but I was never intending to do it myself. Yeah, that kind of later.
So is that just sort of how you quite like? Do you like having quite a lot of being a big part, even if you're not kind of the official composer, or you might not be an official producer and stuff? Do you still like having your kind of sort of involved in all different kind of aspects of the shoot? Is that just the way you quite like to work?
Yeah, I guess it's I guess it's the way I've always done things. I mean, the very first one I made, this little half an hour video film that I guess I did pretty much all of the technical aspects on that, and so I was kind of used to that right from the beginning. And I guess every film I've fulfilled most of the main technical roles, although obviously not the photography. That's that's a bit beyond me. But and so I think this was the first film that really had a big score. And I think that was maybe the problem. I hadn't really anticipated how much, I guess, control you'd have to hand over to someone else to kind of trust them to do that. Which is maybe where the issue arose.
But I was talking of sort of putting your trust in someone and handing something over. I mean, you couldn't have given this lead role to anyone more dependable than Maxine. I mean, it must be so great as a filmmaker to when you write this character and you have these ideas of who this character is, when you know you've left it in such safe hands, someone who can bring so much of themselves and you can kind of let them do that. It must be so great for you.
It was lovely to have Maxine come on board. I mean, I think she joined the film about a year before we started to shoot. So having Maxine playing Fanny was a big part of it. And I think it was clear when we first met that this was a period of history that fascinates Maxine as well, and we both had similar ideas as to how the film should be made, why it should be made, and so there was a good kind of grounding from the beginning there. Yeah.
I've actually been on a set before with Maxine, and she takes her craft incredibly seriously. And I mean this as a compliment, but she's the sort of person I wouldn't want to approach on a set, just at the risk of kind of interrupting her method that she's sort of undertaking. So, not said in a bad way, but is she someone that you have to let her do her own thing sometimes on set? Because she seems to be someone that really needs to be in the right frame of mind and be in the moment to get the best out of the role.
No, I mean, Max likes to collaborate, but I think, what she really enjoys is to be able to kind of feel enveloped in the world of the film, which I think was something that we were always really trying to do by building the sets and having this kind of 360 world that she's surrounded by, and paying attention to detail and making sure that all of that is kind of there in place. And then from that, she can draw from that and give an even better performance.
And you got to work with Charles Dance as well. What was that like? Because I mean, I've interviewed him before, and that was a fantastic 10 minutes of my life.
Charles is great too. I mean, Charles actually, his approach is different. So I mean, Charles likes to come onto set and kind of turn it on, and he does it a couple of takes maybe. So it's a different approach. So it was interesting to have that contrast. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember I did a press junket, and so you could often a big press junket, so everyone's sort of wearing their kind of nice outfits or suits or looking quite smart for the cameras, and he was just sat there in his kind of faded Rolling Stones t-shirt, and I was like, yeah, that's that's exactly what I hope Charles Dance would be like. I was wondering about having a central role in this movie that was a female, how important that was for you to because I think as going back in time and looking through history, the female voice is not as heard as loudly as the male voice, just in terms of what we were learned at school and through cinema. So how important was it as well for you to give a voice to women from this period?
Very important. I think it's a big part of the politics of the period that we saw, particularly in the Quaker movement, an early kind of version of women's rights, fighting for women to be kind of free of their husbands, to be able to speak in church, things that to us now seem insane. But at the time, these are radical ideas. So I think to come at it from that perspective was important. Also, as a Western, I mean, I have always thought of the film as a Western, and there probably aren't enough Westerns with a female perspective. So I thought it was nice for that reason as well.
Yeah, because I think it's funny, isn't it? When we think of Western, we have this kind of sort of tunnel vision as thinking of the kind of Sergio Leone sort of spaghetti westerns, The Searchers or Once Upon a Time in the West and stuff like that. But it's actually quite a broad genre, isn't it? That has much scope to be used in a variety of different time periods.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're stretching the envelope there. I guess I call it Puritan Western. So the iconography is changed. We have instead of the oil dusters, we have the black capes. Instead of the Stetsons, we have the strange kind of Beasley hats. Yeah. Flintlocks instead of Winchester. So there's it's a twist on the Western, I guess. But certainly, yeah, it can be stretched. I mean, as you say, I think we've had Australian Westerns, we've had African Westerns, Brazilian Westerns.
But even I saw one this year. But even though I obviously you have sort of called it a Western, in some ways it does feel like a film that's quite difficult to define. And I was just wondering, does it frustrate you at times in this industry where it does feel like every film needs to have a kind of a label or be put into a kind of box? But actually some films, a bit like this, they feel like they don't have a label. They don't necessarily belong to a specific genre or play by the rules of a genre. But I guess when you have meetings of producers and financiers and stuff, every film needs to have every film needs to be sold on one line, doesn't it?
I guess it's something that has increased a little bit. Maybe it's something to do with the streaming and the kind of categorization that did. I think it's easier for people if they can say this is this is that, and put it into boxes. Sure. But I mean, you can't do anything about that. You just have to make your film and see what happens, really.
Yeah. But talking of sort of streaming, obviously that's how so many people. Well, so we all have to be sort of indulging in film and stuff at the moment. I was just wondering about. So obviously this is going to be on streaming next week. Do you think this is a good home for films like this? Because obviously getting people to the cinemas, even though it's obviously great to see them on the big screen, it's hard to get bums on seats now unless it's got sort of the Disney logo ahead of it or some sort of superhero in it. But do you think that the future of movies and sort of smaller independent films will belong on the smaller screen?
I mean, I hope the cinemas keep going and can survive this and come back. It would be nice to have a theatrical release, particularly on film because it was shot on 35 and we have a print that we use at the festivals. But yeah, I mean, realistically, a larger and larger proportion of the audience will be online, I suppose. And then the quality is good. I think compared to some people's home systems are probably not that far off what you would get in a theatre with a digital print. So it's the two are leveling up, I suppose.
And how are you keeping kind of busy or creative in isolation? Are you writing at the moment? Are you sort of because I guess I've been interviewing so many actors and creative people from the industry over recent weeks on Zoom. It's so interesting to see how all these creative minds are keeping themselves kind of busy.
I probably should be writing. I am not at the moment. I guess there's been a lot of logistics actually. We're getting the soundtrack out as well the same week as the film. So kind of doing the two things at the same time. That's been occupying my time for the past few weeks. Yeah, but I think hopefully once we get into July, I might start to write something.
Yeah. But have you got any? My sort of final question, really, because I'm sort of just going to the end of the interview. But have you got any kind of ideas for what might be next? Have you started constructing things, even at the very preliminary stages?
Not at that stage yet. I mean, there's some ideas and sketches of things and possibilities, but I don't know what the next project will be. Yeah. No.
But just one thing I would say is that about your movies, that they all seem very different from the last, and they all seem to be tackling very kind of different, even sort of time periods, different sort of people. They all feel like they're quite hard to define in terms of, but what I was wondering is that a conscious move on your part? Do you think that you're going to keep trying to test yourself and do new things, or do you just follow the sort of the stories that come to you and it is sort of coincidental where you end up?
I mean, I do like to do something different. Yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm repeating myself, and I guess stylistically as well, to try and find a story that'll go off in another direction. I mean, for example, it would be great to do a musical. Yeah. It'd be great to do I don't know, contemporary thriller or sci-fi. I don't know. I just want to every time I do something completely different. So.
Yeah. Have you got a sort of particular filmmaker that really sort of stands out that you've always admired in that regard?
Not so much. I mean, Takeshi Miike does that to a degree. I guess it's not so common, is it? Yeah, people like to stick to the thing and do it. But yeah, Ichikawa is quite diverse in his choices.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Tom. It's been a real pleasure. And best of luck with the movie. And hopefully, by the time you do your next one, we'll be able to do an interview like this in person. Fingers crossed.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey, you